Part 1. The Arrival. The train hissed to a halt, its wheels screeching against the frozen tracks as the last station faded into the snowy horizon. Eliza Thornwick stepped down onto the empty platform, clutching a leather case and a letter sealed in crimson wax. Ravenscroft Academy loomed in the distance, its Gothic towers piercing the overcast sky, a silhouette of secrets waiting to be unearthed. A carriage awaited her, pulled by two black horses and driven by a silent coachman who offered no greeting. As the wheels rattled along the frostbitten road, Eliza gazed at the surrounding moors. Endless, bleak, and whispering with wind that felt like voices she almost recognized. Ravenscroft had a reputation. Officially, it was an elite boarding school for girls. Unofficially, it was a place for those whose families needed them, hidden. Eliza's aunt had enrolled her after a series of episodes, moments Eliza couldn't remember, but others claimed involved whispers in the dark, candle flames dancing without wind, and doors that opened on their own. The academy stood atop a steep hill, its iron gates etched with Latin prayers. She entered, escorted to her dormitory by a headmistress whose smile did not touch her eyes. The halls were dim, lit only by gas lamps that flickered, and the walls were lined with portraits whose eyes seemed far too watchful. That night, as Eliza lay in her narrow bed beneath heavy quilts, she heard a sound beneath the floorboards, a faint, rhythmic tapping, like fingernails or someone trying to send a message. She sat up, heart racing, and the whisper came, "You're not the first, but you may be the last." Part 2. The Locked Wing. Morning light filtered weakly through the tall, frost-covered windows. Eliza rose early, her mind still echoing with the strange whisper she'd heard during the night. Had it been a dream? Or something else? At breakfast, the other girls sat in rows, speaking in hushed tones. Their uniforms were immaculate, their manners refined, but Eliza sensed an undercurrent of tension beneath their polished surface. When she asked about the tapping noise, the room fell unnaturally silent. One girl, a pale redhead with sharp eyes, leaned toward her. "You heard it already?" she whispered. "Then you shouldn't be here." Before Eliza could ask more, the headmistress entered, and conversation instantly resumed, false and formal. After morning lessons in literature and Latin, Eliza wandered the hallways, her fingers brushing along the cold stone walls. She discovered a long corridor she hadn't noticed before, one lined with broken statues and faded tapestries. At its end stood a set of heavy double doors sealed with rusted chains. A plaque above read, "West Wing, closed by order of the governors, 1867. But Eliza felt a pull toward it. Something behind those doors called to her, not with sound, but with sensation like a breath against her skin. She stepped closer, inspecting the padlock. "Old, brittle, don't even think about it," came a voice from behind. It was the red-headed girl again. "They say that's where she lived. The one who vanished. The one who talked to the floorboards." Eliza's breath caught. What happened to her? The girl narrowed her eyes. "Same thing that'll happen to you, if you keep listening." Then she turned and walked away, leaving Eliza with the strange certainty that this mystery was no legend, and that whatever lay hidden behind those doors had already noticed her. Part 3. The Whisperer's Journal. That night, Eliza couldn't sleep. The tapping had returned, soft, deliberate, rhythmic. She knelt beside her bed, pressing her ear to the floorboards. At first, only silence. But then, unmistakably, a voice, distant and layered, as though buried beneath stone. "Find the ink. Find the truth." A chill gripped her spine. She scribbled the words in her journal, heart racing. She needed answers, and the only place in the academy that might hold them was the old library. At dawn, while others still slept, she slipped down the spiral staircase and crept into the library, a grand, dust-laden chamber filled with towering shelves and forgotten histories. The windows were covered, and only a single oil lamp flickered near the reading tables. She searched through the registry for anything related to the West Wing. Most pages had been torn out, But behind a row of unused dictionaries, she discovered a thin, leather-bound book, its spine unmarked, its cover plain. Inside, the first page read, Journal of Margaret Alden, Ravenscroft Academy, 1866. The entries were written in delicate, looping script. Margaret had been a student here, gifted in languages and isolated from the others. As Eliza turned the pages, the tone darkened. Margaret spoke of voices in the night, doors opening by themselves, and something trapped beneath the floor, something that fed on silence. I tapped once. It tapped back. Now it won't stop. Near the final pages, the writing changed. Jagged. Panicked. They think I'm mad. But the ink bleeds truth. It hides in shadows, in the spaces between words. Watch the mirrors. Trust no one, not even yourself. Eliza snapped the book shut. A noise echoed behind her, a soft creak. She turned. In a reflection of the library's tall mirror, someone was standing behind her. But when she looked back, the room was empty. Part 4. Ink and Ash. Eliza fled the library, clutching Margaret Alden's journal to her chest. Her breath steamed in the cold hallway air, her footsteps echoing too loudly. Something had been in that room, or at least its reflection. She didn't understand what she'd seen, but her instincts screamed danger. Back in her dormitory, she slid the journal beneath her mattress and tried to steady her nerves. But the moment she closed her eyes, the voice returned, clearer now, as though it had learned how to find her. You carry her words. Now you carry her fate. At breakfast, Eliza watched the other girls. They all looked so calm, so obedient. But now she noticed little things. How some never looked in mirrors. How others flinched when the floor creaked. The red-headed girl was missing. After lessons, Eliza approached the girl's roommate. She left in the night, the girl said flatly. Said she heard something in the walls. Later that evening, Eliza returned to the library to search for more clues. This time, she wasn't alone. Headmistress Grimsby stood near the fireplace, staring into the flames, unaware of Eliza's presence. On the mantel was a framed photograph, one Eliza hadn't noticed before. It showed a group of young girls in Ravenscroft uniforms, seated in a row. Eliza's heart skipped. One of the girls was Margaret Alden, and standing directly behind her was a dark figure with no face, a hand resting on Margaret's shoulder, its form smudged like ink bleeding through parchment. Suddenly, the flames flared high, unnaturally high, and the photo burst into fire. Grimsby didn't react. She only whispered, "The ink remembers what the mind forgets." Then, she turned slowly, locking eyes with Eliza. "You shouldn't be here." Eliza fled. That night, as the wind howled against the windows, the tapping beneath the floorboards grew louder. And this time, it was followed by scratching. Something was trying to get out. Part 5. Scratches in the silence. The scratching didn't stop. It came in bursts, 3 sharp scrapes, then stillness. Then again, each time closer, angrier. Eliza sat rigid in her bed, covers drawn to her chin, eyes fixed on the wooden planks beneath her feet. She wanted to scream, but something told her that noise would only feed it. At first light, she crept to the chapel, a cold, forgotten room few students ever entered. There she found Sister Agnes, the Academy's only remaining nun, and perhaps the only adult who didn't look through her like glass. Eliza showed her Margaret's journal. Sister Agnes paled. "You must destroy this." "Why? What happened to her?" She listened. The nun whispered. She opened the space between. Eliza pressed her. Slowly, Agnes relented. Years ago, Margaret Alden had become obsessed with an old mirror found in the West Wing, one rumored to be inked with memory, recovered from a shipwreck in the Hebrides. After the mirror arrived, strange things began to happen. Girls speaking in tongues, falling ill, vanishing. One night, Margaret was heard shouting in the old language, clawing at her walls, trying to let something out. She disappeared. All that was left behind was a journal soaked in ink and a shattered mirror. They sealed the West Wing the next day. Back in her dorm, Eliza found a note beneath her pillow. No name, no handwriting, Just a message formed by words cut from books. Do not trust your eyes. They lie. Come to the mirror. Eliza felt cold. She reached for Margaret's journal again, but its pages were blank. Every word had bled into darkness. Then she saw it. In the mirror above her dresser, her reflection was smiling. But she wasn't. Part 6. The Mirror Room. Eliza didn't sleep. She couldn't, not with her own reflection grinning at her like a stranger. She covered the mirror with a cloth, but even in the dark, she felt watched. Watched from behind glass. Watched from below. By morning, her hands trembled, her pulse racing without cause. She returned to the chapel, but Sister Agnes was gone. Her room, abandoned, bed cold. In her place was a smear of ink across the sheets and claw marks on the stone floor, as though someone had been dragged. Eliza had no choice. She would go to the West Wing. That evening, she stole a skeleton key from the headmistress's office. The building groaned in protest as she crept through the forbidden corridor, her oil lamp casting long shadows that flickered like ghosts. The padlock on the chain doors resisted, then gave way with a reluctant snap. Inside, time had rotted everything. Dust lay in thick blankets. Furniture was overturned. Windows boarded. But the strangest thing was the silence. It was absolute. Not even the wind dared enter here. At the far end of the hall, Eliza found a door carved with strange symbols, one she vaguely recognized from Margaret's journal. She pushed it open. A circular room, walls of black stone, and in the center, the mirror. 7 feet tall, framed in ancient silver twisted like vines, the glass rippling faintly like disturbed water. It stood on a pedestal, untouched by dust or time. Eliza stepped closer, heart pounding. Her reflection followed, but it wasn't mimicking her. It was staring directly at her, waiting. She reached out, fingertips just grazing the glass. A shock surged through her body, cold, electric, seizing her breath. The reflection blinked and whispered, "Let me out." Part 7. Through the glass. Eliza stumbled back, her breath catching in her throat. The mirror's surface had rippled like water, and her reflection, no, something else, was still staring at her, lips moving, eyes hungry. "Let me out," it repeated more clearly now. The voice wasn't her own, but it sounded like her, twisted slightly like a violin out of tune. She turned to run, but the door slammed shut behind her. The room darkened. The mirror glowed faintly, like it held a moon trapped behind its glass. And then one tap, then another, then dozens. They were coming from all around her, beneath the floorboards, inside the walls, behind the mirror. She had to focus. Margaret's journal had said something about ink and truth, about the space between words. Her mind reeled. The ink wasn't just metaphorical, it was literal. Something was bleeding into the world through writing, through reflection, through silence. And now it wanted to come through her. The glass pulsed again, and Eliza suddenly saw images flicker across it. A young Margaret, reaching toward the same mirror. A girl being pulled into darkness. The headmistress, younger, standing behind Margaret, whispering into her ear. Then Eliza saw herself. Not here, but lying on the stone floor, eyes open and glassy. Dead. She screamed, breaking the vision. She fumbled in her coat and pulled out a shard of polished metal, her compact mirror. Without thinking, she held it toward the great mirror. The reflection twisted, recoiled. Cracks spread across the surface like frost on glass. The thing inside shrieked, her voice, but laced with venom. Eliza hurled the compact at the mirror. A flash of light, a gust of wind, then silence. When she opened her eyes, the mirror stood still again, but something had changed. There were now 2 reflections in the glass, and one of them was still moving. Part 8. A second self. Eliza stared at the mirror, heart hammering. Her reflection stood where it always had, pale and wide-eyed. But next to it, the second figure shifted, an echo of her but slightly off. Tailleur, darker, smiling with a mouth that never blinked. The surface shimmered. Then the second Eliza stepped forward, out of the mirror. She landed soundlessly, barefoot on the cold stone floor, her eyes locked with Eliza's. Her skin had the pallor of wax, her hair the same, but twisted into tight, too perfect braids. She wore Eliza's clothes, but the fabric hung wrong, like borrowed skin. "Who are you?" Eliza whispered. The mirror Eliza tilted her head. "I'm you," she said sweetly. "The better version." Eliza backed away. "You're not real." "I am now." The doppelganger smiled wider. "Thanks to you." As the girl stepped closer, Eliza saw her pupils dilate unnaturally, turning inky black. This was what Margaret had released. Not a spirit, an idea. A version of the self drawn from fear, from secrets, from suppressed thoughts and silent screams. The tapping, the whispers, they had all been hers. "I know what you did," the double said. "You think you're innocent. But you've elite. You've hidden things." Images flashed in Eliza's mind. Her old school, the friend she abandoned, the lie she told to get into Ravenscroft, the betrayal that followed her like a shadow. "This place feeds on guilt," the doppelganger hissed. "It amplifies it. That's why we survive. That's why you're mine." Eliza grabbed Margaret's journal from her bag. Pages were still black, but beneath the ink, something shimmered faintly. She held it up, letting the lantern light pass through the paper. A single phrase appeared: "Break the mirror, break the hold." The shadow Eliza lunged. They crashed to the floor, wrestling, hands clawing, legs kicking. The mirror vibrated violently, its surface warping. Eliza rolled free, grabbed a jagged piece of wood, and with all her strength, smashed it into the glass. A sound like thunder. Shards exploded, slicing the air. The doppelganger shrieked, not in pain, but in fear. Her body cracked, as though made of porcelain, then crumbled into dust. The wind died. Silence. Eliza stood, bleeding and shaking. The mirror was gone, but as she turned to leave, something caught her eye on one remaining shard. Her reflection still moved, but she wasn't. Part 9. The ink remains. Eliza's breath caught in her throat. She stared at the shard on the floor, no larger than her hand, where her reflection tilted its head slightly, independently, as if curious. It blinked once. Slowly, she backed away, trembling. The mirror was gone, shattered, the room empty again. But the thing inside wasn't. It had left something behind. She picked up the shard with a piece of cloth and wrapped it tightly. She didn't know what to do with it yet, only that leaving it behind felt dangerous. As she slipped it into her satchel, the faintest sound reached her ears, a soft, rhythmic tapping beneath the stone floor. It hadn't stopped. Outside the west wing, dawn had begun to rise, casting pale light over Ravenscroft Academy. But Eliza no longer felt warmth in the sun. The sky was too gray, the air too still. Back in her dorm, the girls were already whispering. Another student had vanished, quietly removed during the night. Her belongings were gone. Her nameplate was missing. The school erased things quickly, and now no one remembered her, not even her roommate. Headmistress Grimsby stood at the end of the hall, watching Eliza with a thin, unreadable smile. That evening, Eliza returned to the library, drawn by a need to understand. She opened Margaret's journal again, flipping to the ink-soaked pages. And then, something strange happened. The black began to fade, as if bleeding backward. Words reappeared. "The mirror was never the prison," it read. "It was the key. The true trap is memory. The ink remembers. The body obeys." Eliza ran her fingers across the page. It pulsed faintly beneath her touch. Suddenly, she felt dizzy, memories flooding her mind in reverse. Entering the mirror room, the shadow version of herself, the scream. But they weren't hers. They were Margaret's. She staggered back. Was the ink transferring memory? A chilling thought dawned on her. What if the journal wasn't just a record? What if it was a vessel? And what if Margaret was still inside it? The lantern flickered beside her. In the shadow it cast, Eliza saw herself sitting still. But she was standing. Part 10, the final page. Eliza turned slowly toward the shadow cast by the lantern. It was her silhouette, same posture, Same hair, same shape, but unmoving. Frozen. Wrong. She stepped back. The shadow didn't follow. Her mind reeled. The journal pulsed faintly in her hands, the ink shifting like breath beneath skin. The final lines had returned, fresh and wet. To leave, you must forget. To stay, you must remember. Ink binds. Flesh breaks. Suddenly, pain lanced through her temple. Images burst behind her eyes. Margaret screaming into the mirror, the headmistress whispering, ink pouring from mouths. The academy wasn't just a school. It was a seal, a place of containment. And Eliza, like Margaret, was chosen not to learn, but to carry, to become a vessel. The whispers began again, louder now, pouring from the journal, the floorboards, even her own lips. Her hands trembled as the words of Margaret's journal twisted into her own handwriting. Her name began to appear in the margins, replacing Margaret's. Not written, rewritten. She was being overwritten. No, Eliza said aloud, voice breaking. I won't become her. She staggered toward the fireplace. The journal throbbed in her hands like a heartbeat, resisting. But Eliza had made her choice. With a cry, she threw the journal into the flames. For a moment,